Hello, and welcome to my presentation on the Three-Fifths Compromise of the U.S. Constitution. Ms. Griswold attempts to explain something really complex to seventh grade social studies students. That is my target audience, is seventh graders studying slavery and abolition. If this is useful to you, great, but please know that my audience is seventh graders, not college students. Okay, great, here we go. So first we need to understand that there are three branches or parts of the government. We have the executive branch. That's the president, the governors. We have the legislative branch. That's Congress. They make laws. And we have the judicial branch. That's the judges and the courts. They judge the people who break the laws. Now, we're going to focus on the legislative branch right now, the legislative branch. In the US, this is called Congress, and it has two chambers, which is another word for room. The first chamber is called the Senate, and there are two senators per state. So, for example, California, with 39.5 million people, plus or minus, has two senators. And Delaware, with its 974,000 people, also has two senators. The other chamber of the legislative branch is called the House of Representatives. This is the number of representatives each state gets is based on population. Two for each for the Senate, population. So California, which with its 39.5 million people, has 52 representatives. And Delaware, with its 974,000 people, has one representative, okay, based on population. So let's talk about where things were in these new United States as they are writing the Constitution, okay? We have the free northern states and the slaveholding southern states. So here's the scenario. I'm going to make up some fake numbers. These are not real numbers. It's just simplified to help you understand. Let's pretend a state gets one representative for every 10 people. So if a state has 100 people, 10 representatives. You with me? So let's think about a specific population numbers. Let's say South Carolina, a southern slave state, has 100 white people and 50 enslaved black people for a total of 150. And New York, a northern free state, has 120 white people and 10 free black people, a total of 130. So let's think about representatives. We're going to count those people. Yeah, we're counting all the people. South Carolina, the southern slave state with its 100 white people and 50 enslaved black people. And New York with its 120 white people and 10 free black people. Sorry, that L is capitalized randomly. The South Carolina gets 150 people, 15 representatives. New York is 130 people, 13 representatives. So here's the scenario. The South says yes, they have greater voting power on laws. They get 15 votes. And the North says, oh no, the South has more voting power. So if we think about a scenario, let's say the House of Representatives is voting on a law. The South has more votes, so they have the power to change or prevent laws from being passed. More representatives, more votes. More votes means you can decide the outcome of voting on laws. So let's pretend Congress is voting on a new law. Let's say the North is proposing to end slavery. The South has 15 votes. The North has 13 votes. Who's going to win? The South. And the North is going, uh-oh, we're feeling a little nervous. So the North proposes to the South, we're not counting your enslaved people. You don't give them rights. They don't count in your population. Secretly, it's because they don't want the South to have so much voting power. The South says, no way. I'm not signing off on this Constitution of this United States if you don't let us protect and keep slavery. Slavery is our entire economy. We are not giving up slavery. So we're not going to agree to give you more voting power than us. Okay? So there's this conflict. North says, not counting your slaves. South says, you better count them or we're not joining. We're not signing the Constitution. So let's come up with a compromise. I'm not going to count. I'm going to allow you to count your enslaved population for the House of Representatives, for your voting representatives. But I don't want you to count all of them. Let's pick a number in the middle. How about 3 out of 5? 3/5. 3/5. So South Carolina with its 100 white people and 50 black people, in reality, instead, let's call that 30. We're going to call it 30, even though it really is 50. But for the purposes of figuring out how many representatives you get, let's call it 30. Okay, so then we look at New York. It's got its 120 white people, its 10 free black people. So now when we count to figure out how many representatives, the South has 130, which is 13 representatives, and the North has 130, which is 13 representatives. So now they're both saying, okay, we're even. Maybe we can agree that we'll be even. One of us doesn't have more voting power than the other. Who proposed this compromise? It was actually proposed by the North because the South was refusing to join the United States and to sign the Constitution and become a part of this one country. And so they said, we've got to meet them somewhere in the middle with this compromise that we're going to count 30, basically 3 out of 5, 3/5 of their black enslaved population. So they still have some counted, but not all of them. They needed to get the South to agree. They needed to get them on board. They were holding out. They were saying, nope, we're not joining this United States. We're not signing the Constitution unless you assure us that we will have equal power in Congress, in the legislative branch. Okay. So the middle ground was to count a portion, the 3/5. Yeah. One justification was that enslaved people didn't have full rights, so it isn't fair to count them in your full population. Ultimately, the 3/5 compromise was meant to curtail the power or control, rein in the power of the slave states. So its purpose was good. The purpose was to sort of keep it in check. But it's also super uncomfortable. What are we saying? Black enslaved people are 3/5 of a person? They're not even a full person? That wasn't what it meant literally. They didn't think like they cut off an arm and a leg from every enslaved person and they're walking around. No, it was just for the purpose of counting the population. But it does symbolically send a message about the value of Black enslaved lives in the US Constitution. It does. And you cannot deny that when you hear that you're 3/5 of a person, that you're putting in writing that it's okay with you to put into writing, into the foundational document of a country, that a person doesn't count. You don't count. You aren't whole. So yes, it is super uncomfortable. Its purpose was not to create an uncomfortable devaluation of Black lives, but it's the way that it was written down. So that is the 3/5 compromise, a way to balance power between northern and southern states. Where the 3/5 compromise fell apart was that as states were added to the United States, they were either going to be slave states or free states. And there was this push-pull of, well, if we allow another free state, then they have more power. So then there was another slave state. Well, then there would be another slave state. And then suddenly the free states were outnumbered in representatives. And so there was this jockeying back and forth. I've shown you that map of no, slave free in Congress. And ultimately, with Missouri and Kansas, and with John Brown, as we're going to learn, a conflict, an unsettlable conflict arose that they were going to have to decide once and for all what the law of the land was, slavery or freedom. And they went to war for it. So the 3/5 compromise was what set the stage for that. And that ultimately led to a conflict that had to be settled with war. All right, there it is. I hope it was helpful. If you have any further questions, please leave them in the comments.